right, guys. How is everyone? I'm sorry we're running a little bit late there with some technical difficulties. The lovely person you see in front of you is Bree Diodata. Thank you so much for being here today, Bree. Bree's an alum from class of 2019.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being with us. I'm David Tanner. I'm your host. And Bree is going to take us through the show here tonight. This is called Mementos of a Dream. It is sculpture from the Freedman Gallery collection. And I'm going to start by asking Bree how she actually got involved with this project, how she came up with that theme, all of that kind of stuff. So tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So I was actually working here in the Freedman Gallery while I was going to school here at Albright. I was working as a gallery attendant and I loved it. I was a history and arts administration major, and I'm very interested in the arts, and, as well as working in a gallery or a museum kind of setting. And I would, show that interest in my classes. I took a class with David, and we actually, as a class, curated an exhibition together. And I thought it gave my life so much meaning. It felt I really felt like I was doing what I was meant to do, what I loved. And a few time passed, and the previous curator and David came up to me and asked if I would be interested in curating my own show with pieces from the collection. And I had been given access to the archives, so I had seen just the beautiful pieces that hadn't been seen by a huge audience.
That's right.
So I really wanted to bring them out and really show everybody the beauty that's kind of just hidden behind the walls, and bring them out and see them in person. So I'm really excited.
Yay! We are so excited to have you back too. You were one of our great gallery attendants. We've had a lot of great students be gallery attendants for us, and we really loved having you and miss you.
Mm-hmm.
But you are right. We only do about one show a year from the collection, and the other show that you referenced was the work of Clinton Fine that we did as a class project, which was definitely one of the highlights of my time here too, one of the best classes and a great project. But for this exhibit, I know you started with this idea of kind of dreams and things like that.
Right.
So tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So while I was taking classes here, I ended up taking a modern art history class. And prior to that, I was really interested in the classics, the European art that you see at the Met, and I didn't really understand postmodern or modern art until I took that class. And not only did I start to understand it, but I completely fell in love with it. It became my favorite, just kind of, not movement, but my favorite kind of movement of art.
Yeah, absolutely. That period. Mm-hmm.
So I took a Dada and Surrealism class with Professor Gary Adelstein and Archie Perrin, and just to really further dig my claws into the beauty of that kind of just strange and whimsical art.
Absolutely.
And I noticed that a lot of the sculptures in the collection kind of we had a lot of very modern pieces. And so I wanted to pool a lot of what I've learned from my art history classes and just show my knowledge to a wider audience.
Awesome. Yeah, that's perfect. That is great. So we are going to see a lot of surrealist pieces in here, some conceptual pieces, things like that. So let's start with some art. How about that? Let's take a look at this first piece here. Tell us a little bit about this piece and why you chose it for the show.
Sure. So this piece is called 29 Cigarettes. As you can see, there are 29 cigarette butts kind of scattered behind this almost cement-looking wall with this portrait of a woman behind it. I did a lot of research into this piece. The artist, Getz, she had already done an exhibition in Florida that was centered around smoking art, art that involves cigarettes. And it's hard to find the correlation between the two until you look deeper in and what they're commenting on. So this piece is talking about the struggles that the female form would take in regards to cigarette smoking.
It was kind of at first seen as only a male pastime and evolved to be into this rebellious, independent girl pastime. You would always see like the cool girl with the lipstick smoking outside, you know. It became more feminine. This is strengthened by the portrait right here. So there was this poet from the Renaissance, Italian Renaissance, who had talked on the beauty standards of the time, and that would be, you know, blonde hair, huge forehead, long neck. That was the ideal woman. And so putting her in the center, surrounded by all these cigarettes, you can really see how she's talking on the beauty standards that women face, and using cigarette smoking as a motif for that.
So a very timely piece, you know, even for today. We're still dealing with ideas of beauty, especially for women and things like that as well. So really an interesting piece. And so this is a collage as well.
Right.
And so that's one of the different types of media that you'll see here today. And I know some of what you talk about in the catalog that's forthcoming is the different types of artwork that we're going to see today. So all of them, though, have some sort of three-dimensional aspect. So
Correct.
Collage is the first one.
Right. So
Awesome.
you don't see any like completely flat pieces.
Right. So no paintings, prints, things like that.
Correct.
Interesting. All right. Let's go on to the second one here.
So this second one is really interesting. I saw it in the archives, and I noticed that it had no title, and on top of that, it also had no artist. So I asked David about it, and we kind of did some investigating, and we aren't 100% sure exactly still, but we think it came from a student art show, correct?
Right, that is correct.
It was probably a faculty purchase. But I chose it because the feeling it sparked. As soon as I noticed that there was no artist name, there was no title, and you see it's this like chicken coop, and it's frozen in this moment of hatching, and I just thought that was really interesting. I love the kind of this kind of just normal moment, frozen and then brought into kind of like an art setting. It's super conceptual. And given that we don't know the artist's name, I'm not sure if we can ever find out exactly what his meaning behind it is, just like our dreams that we have, which we search and try to find symbolism for.
Well, that's a good point. And I will say to that, in doing some further research in our collections, one of the things that we uncovered was 2 pictures with this work in it, which allowed us to actually arrive at least at a date.
Right.
So August 19, I think, was the date of the picture, which is probably when it was actually printed, which might mean then that spring of 91 is when the student show would have happened. So we've reached out to faculty who were here at that time. They recall the work, but they don't recall the exact student. I've reached out to the registrar's office to see if we could get a class list. So we're pursuing all the avenues, but this is a cool reason to do a show like this, because there may be an alum out there who remembers this, remembers his or her friend working on this piece. The artist may see this as well.
Yes, which is exciting, for them to see, 20 years after they've been to school, to have their own piece in a show like this. It must be
so
exciting.
The one thing I think may have happened too is because we do have those annual student shows at the end of every semester, sometimes work gets left behind.
Correct, yes.
And this could be a case where that got left behind. It doesn't have an accession number, so that means it's probably not likely that it was actually maybe purchased from the show for the collection, or I don't know. I think it might have just been left behind. But really, in some ways, now that we've had it for 30 years,
and
it's kind of ours.
It's definitely ours. And it's awesome. Like it's really cool piece. I don't know if you can see on the camera, but there's not only are these eggs here, but there's also these 2 like rooster playing cards, as well as a fried egg in the back. So it's very eggy, which is super fun. But I really like this piece a lot, and I hope we find the artist one day.
I'm glad you included it, and it certainly fits your theme. So, All right, let's look at this little bear sculpture here.
So yeah, super adorable little figure. I love it. It really does remind me of just kind of like an icon that you would see in some kind of like ancient ruin. I love this artist because reading about him, he is from Bucks County, which is the county that I grew up in, and he would he would work a lot with stone and wood that he would find from his local landscape. So I love that he incorporated, he incorporated themes of nature and his love of nature into it. But I love his style and how naive but also very modern it is. It's simple but super impactful.
Absolutely. So I was showing folks too how thin really the work is.
Really, yes. So it looked like some kind of river stone that he found and carved into, which is, I would love to see his process on it and the tools that he uses. But yeah, I wanted to include this because of the feelings that it invokes in myself personally.
Absolutely.
I feel like it's from another time and place that I might have dreamed of.
Yeah, it's really lovely. So the artist for this piece is George, and I'm probably going to murder the name here, Papashvlly.
Me and my friend were actually looking up the pronunciation of this name because I was so nervous of mispronouncing it, but I believe it is Papashvlly.
Papashvlly, there you go. There's the information on it. So this was made in 1957 from sandstone.
Mm-hmm.
As Bree just said, this artist would use kind of found stones from the local area, things like that. He also carved works in. This is a sandstone piece, but I saw a list of things in jade, things in limestone, a lot of different kinds of softer stones, typically. And he also had a connection to California and collected stones when he was out there. He had a show here. Let's see, this is from 1957. I think it was in the early 70s that we had a catalog from. Solo show. And what's interesting about this piece, to add to Bree's research, is we list the provenance as unknown. And part of that is because when it was given to the college, it was kind of predating the gallery.
Right.
So they didn't actually keep records the way that we keep them for the gallery and the museum today. What I found, and this is going to really interest Bree, is I'm pretty sure that we now know who gave this piece.
Ooh.
It was a former professor. In fact, she and her husband were both professors here. The last name is Douds, D-O-U-D-S. She was a professor of French,
right.
And when she passed away, she donated her whole house to the college and the contents within it. And if you go to the catalog that I mentioned for that show that we had, this is listed in the catalog. The number is there. It's verified on the bottom, not our accession number, but his number. And it's attributed to the Douds. So that's how I was able to kind of go back and research that. I'm going to see, they had a son, but he died before them.
Right.
So I don't think that there were any other children, which is why the remains came here of the house and things like that. So I think that's probably the provenance, and we should be able to say that pretty safely, but I want to verify a few more things.
Right, of course, that's amazing. Well, thank you to the Douds.
Absolutely, yeah. That's great. And that's another reason why we're doing this show, is to kind of help us do some additional research, all of that kind of stuff.
Yes.
All right, so tell us a little bit about this piece.
So Dante Giglio, he was tied to the abstract expressionism movements, and his work kind of grew with the American movements that were happening around his time. So this is an assemblage piece, very reminiscent of like a Rauschenberg or other kind of more surreal artists as well. I really love it because it looks like this kind of machine that we don't know what it does. Mm-hmm. This kind of like dreamy, like rustic machine that you could just turn this wheel and something fantastic might happen. And so I really love that. I love the wood materials that he used. They're all found objects, which are strongly attributed to this realistic movement also.
and a lot of those techniques were used by the abstract expressionisms later in the year. So I care about this piece. I do think it, could one day do something really great.
Right.
You never know. It's very dreamy. It's very surreal. And
I bet it makes rust-colored and tasting candy.
Dust. Oh, yeah.
Dust. Yes. Yeah, it does look like it's just poised to make something.
Right.
Very, very cool.
I would love to see if the kind of what it looked like when he constructed it, if the rust is just something that's happened over time, or if it's stayed in that kind of just look for so long, because I'm actually not sure about that. It does seem painted in places, so I feel like he wanted it all to match and be like the same kind of color, so it all looks like one machine.
Yeah, the earliest image that we have of it is when it was taken for the collection, and it seems to be in about the same shape.
Really?
I mean, rust can continue to grow, and so I think we're seeing a little bit about that, but it was put together and looked very similar to what you see here. So this is the third type of work that we've seen. Now we've seen kind of a sculpture with the little bear. We've seen assemblage. We've seen collage as well. So a couple of different examples of this, because I would probably say the chickens are kind of assemblage as well.
As well, yeah. And for those who are unsure of the definition of an assemblage, it's like a collage using 3D objects together that kind of come out of the canvas. So
very nice. What I will also add to this is this particular artist, Dante Giglio. In your research, you talked about him being born in Rome and then coming here with his family. He actually gave a lecture here at Albright in 1969.
Wow.
He was one of those artists that kind of, again, predates the gallery, who had been invited to campus to speak to those people that were starting to form that original Fine Arts Commission.
Right.
So I'm sure that at that point they became very aware of his work. And then if you look at the label, it says that this particular piece was purchased by the Fine Arts Commission, which was founded in 1970, so a year after he came. And this was purchased in 1974. So they kept their eye on him and eventually purchased this piece of work.
Yeah, he was pretty successful during his time, which was really awesome. And he is Italian born, just an Italian like me, so I love
Nice.
that.
Yes, and I know your research also talked about him being a muralist and that his father, had...
helped him train.
Yeah,
in Rome, which was
absolutely.
really- So very classically trained.
So from Italy to Germany.
One thing about all these artists is that they do come from a lot of different corners of the world, which
Yes.
is amazing.
Yeah. This is probably one of my favorite little pieces. I love this piece.
It's the Guido. It's for Guido Brink. It's a ritual symbol. I do love his pieces. His piece, in a way, kind of reminds me of the Papashvlly piece in a strange way. It's very tribalistic, very biomorphic. I really like it. You would see it on like the walls of some like Aztec cave or something. And then the mirror the mirror material that he uses really makes it stand out, because it kind of like reflects a little bit on the counter, and it's just it's very gorgeous.
It's really cool. I love it. It's just so simple. It also reminds me, of course, of another kind of native son, if you will, with Keith Haring. Some of the forms that he adopted, and you see a lot in his work. Things like that.
I definitely, as soon as you said that the Keith Haring, I immediately made that connection as well.
Absolutely. So this is, let's see, silver-plated steel on marble.
Right.
You can see the base there. We have another piece by this gentleman in the collection as well. It's completely metal, so the box part of it is solid at the bottom, and then it's a longer piece. I think that one was in the show at the Goggle Works a couple of years ago.
I do love the marble that he chose for that kind of base. I think it really elevates it and makes it have this air of being sophisticated.
Yeah, I really like it too, and it's very modernist. For the time period. This was from 1971. The research that you did also talked about him kind of coming from Germany. He had been, I think, was this the gent that was the sniper in the war?
Right, yes, he was the sniper.
Yeah.
So after the war, he had talked about in an interview that I was reading of his, all the horrors that he saw in war. When he moved to the States, he wanted to kind of get away from that in his art and make it a lot more symbolic and abstract of his feelings of life and death, which I think was really interesting. He definitely had a very, I wouldn't say tumultuous, but I would say eventful life, being in World War I.
Yeah, for sure. He eventually, when he did come to the U.S., your research indicated that he settled in Wisconsin and was one of the founders eventually of the Milwaukee Institute, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
he was.
Very cool. All right, let's travel on. We'll pull out eventually and kind of give you an overview of the whole show. But let's take a look at this piece. Ooh.
So this is Jesse Amado. First of all, look how beautiful that blue is. It's just so electric. It reminds me a lot of Eve Klein's blue. And also, for those watching who can't really figure out exactly what this is right here, it is actually chicharron, which is it's like pork skin, right? Like a brine.
Yep.
Which I think is really interesting to incorporate this organic material on this piece. And it is titled "I Am Not Your Mexican Harlot." And I know that the art historian here at Albright also wrote a paper. It is a recent acquisition.
Yes.
But it is he's talking a lot about his Mexican identity in this. It also calls forward to the film, the I'm Not Your Negro film, which is commenting on the lack of African American representation in media. And I'm using that title paired with his, it kind of gives an insight on what he was trying to get across with this, which is his representation of his culture in media.
Absolutely, yeah. And Maite Berrigan, Dr. Berrigan did write a great piece when we were looking at this as an acquisition that talks about the reference to James Baldwin's I Am Not Your Negro, all of that. What's really interesting, and I don't know if you can see, let me see if I can get up close and you can see this better. Oh yeah, sometimes you can see things actually. Can you see that, Bree?
Oh yeah, the texture on there.
So this is a highly textured work, and this is some sort of glass bead gel that he has applied to this. And this unusual color of blue, which is called, is it on there? I don't think we had enough room on the label. I think it's called Le Corbusier.
I think it's like a newer shade of blue that has been kind of created.
Absolutely. And so those are two elements that are really important, along with the chicharron that you mentioned here. Also, I think this kind of fact that it's wrapped in this felt, so kind of hiding the identity in some ways, to try to make it more palatable, I think, for the consumer, if you will, is part of his intent. So you have this beautiful kind of blue background, and then right in the middle, this kind of harsh chicharron, which is like a street food.
Right, exactly.
Very tasty. Not that you would eat this. This has been treated, so yeah, we don't want to. Yeah, don't eat it. But yeah, a lot of elements coming together here in this really, really important piece. And so our last curator, Elena Coates, lived in San Antonio for 10 years, worked with the artists there, made us aware of this piece and this artist, and we were able to get this particular work as a purchase through the Doris Chan and Freedman Endowment Fund. So really, really happy to have that. And I think it's a great inclusion in the show. So this is the first time we're showing it in the gallery.
Exciting.
Yay! What I think is really interesting is the conversation that this piece has with the one hanging next to it. So let's move over here and talk about this Rafael Soto piece.
So Soto's work, I do love optical art, that kinetic kind of art.
in person, even more impactful than I'm sure on the live. But when you're staring at it, it almost makes you a little dizzy.
It does.
There's these thin lines behind these squares that are kind of jutting out, and he made a few of these pieces. I would butcher the name of it. Are you sure on the pronunciation? I'm not a...
I think it's Homenaje al Humano.
Right.
And it's from an American portrait. So 1975 is the date of this work.
So he has a few of these, I believe, in kind of a collection with this red square.
Yeah, this is actually a multiple,
Right.
believe it or not. This is a multiple. So he made, I can't remember, I think 50 of these was the total.
Right.
Yeah, very interesting. So I know you did some research in general to, talk about the artist as, being Venezuelan born and then moving to Paris and working in Paris for a long time. I found an article, more recent article that was really interesting because as you state in your essay for the, and appropriately, this work and a lot of his work, which he did major installations that were kind of all very sculptural and kind of meant to immerse you in the work. And all of those are really about the form,
Right.
About the illusion, the foreground, the background, and what happens to the eye.
Yes.
But the article that I read recently was talking about his work in terms of whether or not it had any political content. And for a long time, art historians really have not pursued that.
Right.
But this article coming out of Canada from an art historian I thought was really interesting, and I think this bears out for some more research. But when you kind of compare these two, so back to the Amado piece, that's definitely talking about his Mexican American heritage, and then the Soto piece, as a Venezuelan, especially at the time of this. The time period of this, which would have been the American bicentennial, and the reference to an American portrait. I mean, what does that single red square really, does it represent something? Does it represent the isolationism that maybe someone coming to this country would feel?
I believe so, 100%, especially with the 50, definitely calling upon the 50 states of the USA.
Yeah.
I do think he is, as a Venezuelan immigrant, talking on how he feels in American culture, that kind of like assimilate or be assimilated kind of feeling that the U.S. has kind of shown to immigrants in the past.
Absolutely.
And feeling like an outsider among a sea of the same squares definitely could be taken out of this piece.
Yeah, I think that's. I think that'll be interesting to see if his work comes back into vogue and people start to talk about that and reference that. He did, I believe, pass away. I can't remember, but there are some kind of live tapes of him with people talking. So it'd be good to go back and kind of research that and see. Who knows? Maybe there's a PhD in there for you somewhere, Bree.
Yeah,
She's like, oh yes. Yeah. All right, let's look at some ceramics.
Yes, so Robert Blanchard, who made this piece, when doing research on this piece, I had seen it in the archives and I was really drawn to it. I loved the way he constructed it. There's these kind of like loops on the bottom and along the sides of the handle as well. It looks almost like, at first I thought it was a found object, and it could still be, but then after researching, I found out he was a local sculptor.
He was.
Stockton.
Yeah.
I believe he is still, I believe he has not passed. He is still around the area. I did find a Reading Eagle article talking, they were interviewing him, and he sets up this kind of shop on the side with all his sculpture and pottery pieces. So he's mainly a potter, and his other things are a lot more functional than this, which is mostly meant to just, exist and be appreciated.
Yeah. Yes. So that article that you found, which was great and is now in our archives, talks about him, kind of having this once a year sale and people flocking to buy a piece of his. It also talked about how much of a perfectionist that he was, and that he would, immediately take a hammer to anything that he felt like was inferior, or had a chip or got broke, which concerns me for our piece, because this piece at one time did have a lid when we acquired it. That lid did get broken. This piece had been loaned out on campus, and so we recalled it, and when the lid came back, the lid had been broken. So I am going to try to find out, as you said, if he's still living, or if there's someone in his family maybe that's in the area, to see if we could eventually acquire another piece, a whole piece. I certainly think, the remaining part of it, which is the vessel, is beautiful on its own. But knowing that he was a perfectionist, I'd love to have a piece of his that is wholly intact, especially since he was such a well-known regional potter. The other thing that that article mentions is that he was so well known nationally for his glazes, and that people from all over the country would call him to study glazing and things like that. So I think that's another reason to make sure that we have a good representation of him in the collection. I found a second article that talked about him studying under another kind of very well-known regional potter named Ray Gallucci, who was in Allentown. So this particular gentleman, Mr. Blanchard, actually studied under Mr. Gallucci as an apprentice. And he had come here from New Jersey to attend Kutztown. And so had studied at Kutztown in art education, and then did this apprenticeship, got involved in ceramics, and did this apprenticeship with Mr. Gallucci, and then became well known in his own right. So.
One other thing to note about him is, before I found those articles, I was looking up his name in like the yellow pages, just trying to find anything. I called so many random Robert Blanchards, and I just want to say sorry to those random people.
That's adorable.
But I did finally, find him, and so I'm so happy that we were able to show his work here.
That's amazing. Very, very cool. Glad you included that. All right, I'm going to step away here so we can get a good shot. You'll have to speak up a little bit since I'm getting back.
Sure. So this piece, Marduk by Nida Al-Hilali, I hope I pronounced her name correctly. I love this piece so much. You can see the sheer size of it. I'm not the tallest person, but still it's quite large. And it's beautiful. She's a fiber artist. And this piece, Marduk in particular, Marduk is the name of this Babylonian god that first just started out as kind of like an unknown deity, and then started picking up more, I guess not followers, but was recognized a lot more widely, and he is a god of creation. And so I did think it was quite interesting that she would make this kind of figure of him. I'm pretty sure she was tapping into the vein of Marduk with her creation in art. It's very breathtaking, the colors that she used. I love fiber art, and you don't see too much of it when you go to a gallery, so I was really excited to see that. We had a piece like this, and that it could be shown, and it was a later edition as well. It was kind of, would you mind talking about how you found this?
Sure, yeah. So this is actually a piece that's been in the collection for quite a while. It's been wrapped up for conservation reasons. Excuse me, hanging and wrapped up. Here I'm getting a little bit of a close-up of that face that you can see. So it was acquired, actually, one of the earlier pieces by the Fine Arts Commission, and it hung for many, many years in the library. And I think it was actually on display so long that when they started numbering and accessioning pieces, it got missed, because it's never had an accession number, and I think that's why it probably didn't show up in your search originally, because it's not actually entered into the database.
That makes sense.
And so when we did the inventory, it's kind of funny, it's such a big piece, because we've done several inventories since I've been here, and we've always just kind of skipped over it.
Yes.
and never come back to it, and then forgotten. And then in this last really, really comprehensive inventory, we realized that it did not have a number associated with it. However, I was able to also find all this information out about it because there's an older Albright alumnus magazine that actually the whole issue was dedicated to the gallery. So there's information in there about Doris Freedman, the formation of the Fine Arts Commission in 1970. And this piece is actually, the photograph of this piece is in there. Wow. And it indicates that it's a Fine Arts Commission purchase. And our early handwritten records indicate that we did purchase it. But this artist, as you mentioned, is one of like 4 artists, women artists who were working in the 70s that really turned to fiber and weaving and elevated it to basically a fine art. So elevated it from craft to fine art. And they did it with this type of work. So she's very well known, very well collected in major institutions. We believe she's still also living out in California.
I've read that too, yes.
Yep. And so this piece, because it had not been in the collection database and Bree had missed it, I said to her, I think this would be a good piece to include. It is very sculptural. It certainly, would be something from a nightmare for many people, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
It was love at first sight.
It was love at first sight, yeah. When we do, at the end, when we pull back and you see the whole gallery, you'll see like how impressive this is on the wall and things like that. Yeah. But let's turn to some Sokovs. We have 4 works by this artist. And the first one you're going to see, I'm super excited about. Tell us about this.
So I'm a big fan of Sokov. He was kind of a pioneer in the Sots Art. And the next piece, I will go into more of what Sots Art is all about. But this piece in particular, which is called Sun on the Red Square, it is this beautiful giant stump of a birch tree. And so this artist is a Russian artist. And the birch tree is the actual national tree of Russia. The Red Square is a super historical just plaza in Moscow that is the home to Kremlin. Lenin lived there. A whole bunch of very important executions, celebrations. A lot of things happened in this square. This neon piece, when I first saw the sculpture, was actually in disrepair, and so David let me know that they commissioned a neon artist who was able to repair that, and it just looks absolutely beautiful now. You can see there's kind of like gold paint on it, which kind of gives that sparkle and really reflects off that neon in such a strong way. It's gorgeous.
Yeah.
I love neon art. A lot of my favorite artists, like Dan Flavin, James Turrell, use light as a medium in their art, and I think it's such a statement. I love it.
Yeah, this is a really interesting piece, and that gold is actually gold leaf. We did research that and find that is a gold leaf application. It really makes that pop and kind of has that burning disc feeling when you look at it behind. What I would also add to this, and before I do this, I just want to say thank you to so many people on tonight, really a lot of people. I saw one of our alums just jumped on, Brittany Salick, so that was nice as well. Many of your family, if I'm judging by the last name of Diodata. So thank you guys all for joining us. Bree's been doing a great job here. But the one thing I wanted to add about this piece is, as Bree mentioned, we did actually have a neon artist recreate this. So he blew the glass tube because the glass had been broken. The neon was, of course, the gas was gone out of it. We didn't even know what color the neon was. So, and this is where art and science kind of come together. He was able to sample from the residue of the original glass tubing to find out that it was actually the kind of gas that is a red neon. And so he was able to then put the appropriate color back into it. And I know that this work references kind of a very important event that happened in Russia and some other things as well. So we might have guessed that it was red, but we didn't really want to just go ahead and make that assumption until we knew for sure. So him being able to verify that that was in fact red neon was really important.
Yeah, which is amazing. I believe his piece, Sokov was calling upon the dissolution of the USSR that was happening around this time. Also, another performance art piece that happened in Russia was a group of artists who kind of was at the Red Square, and they laid this giant black cloth of square out, and it's called Black Square on the Red Square. And so I do think he was kind of alluding to that, and maybe like flipping where the black square was kind of talking on the harshness of the Russian government. This is talking on the joy of change.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Very important piece. So happy to have it. And I think one of maybe two pieces we have in the collection that are light pieces. So really important.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Let's move on to another Sokov work here.
Right. So this definitely shows, like I said before, he was a pioneer of this Sots Art movement. To define Sots Art, it is heavily influenced by the pop art movement that was happening in America at the time, with more of a Russian twist. So it's nice to note that during this time in that country there was a lot of interesting things happening in history. I liked that he put these kind of two icons next to each other. They have nothing to do with one another, Stalin and Monroe. I'm sure they've never met. And to be so close, tied to each other, is very interesting to me. And definitely, Marilyn was a big icon in the pop art movement as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of really ties it together. It's a real big, it's a great explanation of what Sots Art is all about.
Yes. And this one is one of two mechanical pieces. And by that, will you come around and pull the string for us? There you go. So a little bit of whimsy, a little bit of maybe, nastiness there.
Yes.
But that's something too that you may be speaking to this in the last piece as well. These kind of rough-hewn wood sculptures are something that he did later in his career. Mm-hmm. It was... Sorry, I'm not sure why I'm getting that. Oh, there we go. And it was something that he then added this element with the string and the live action to make it mechanical, to kind of reference toys from his childhood, things like that.
Yes, we will see that, and not the next piece, but the one after that. But the rough hewn, and I do think it talks, the rough hewn of the Stalin next to the, the beautiful print of Marilyn. That stark contrast between the two. Is really interesting to me.
Yeah, I think that's important too. All right, let's move on to our little bust here.
Right, so this is our third Sokov piece, and he did quite a few busts of Stalin. I'm certain he wasn't the biggest fan of him.
I think you are right.
The kind of red, like rectangles shapes on the top is actually calling to another artist, Malevich. And he did another where he referenced other artists as well, like Calder, etc. And it's kind of this graffiti on, this important figure, that you see. And that's what he's just, it's a big kind of, disrespectful gesture towards him, a bust.
Absolutely.
Which is meant to be, admired and put on display and, thought of for historical figures, and then for him to just kind of graffiti over the chest with this other artist's motif who had awful relationships with Stalin. He was very against the kind of art movements that was coming out of Russia at the time. So it's good that he was able to kind of stick up for Malevich and other artists as well.
Absolutely, yeah. As you were kind of alluding to, Malevich predates Sokov, certainly,
Correct, yes.
and had actually been arrested and sent to an internment camp, and because of his art,
Right.
Which they found to be degenerate or lacking, if you will.
Exactly.
So this reference here is kind of referencing, Malevich's sacrifice as an artist. And in your essay, you made kind of a compelling point about how pop art and Sots art are different in that pop art is really all about commercialism.
So consumerism.
Yes.
And then Sots art is much more about, governmental control.
Exactly.
That's happening. And it really shows the different issues that each country of the U.S. In our capitalistic kind of growth, like explosion, more like, compared to the rigid tightness of the USSR during those times. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a really important and compelling point, especially with this one, this particular sculpture, kind of referencing that idea that, people are willing to go to jail for their art.
Exactly.
I think it's also important, especially and timely, with all that we're seeing today here in the U.S., at least, with how art can push forward social justice issues.
Right.
And artists have always done that. And in the USSR, that was very important because there was so much propaganda, governmental propaganda, and the artists were really some of the only people who could speak out about it.
Exactly.
And being sent to jail meant that your message was getting out there.
Yeah, so art and politics, have always had a strong connection to one another.
Yes, for sure. All right.
The last Sokov piece titled Noses. So when I first saw this, I wanted to include it because of how whimsical, of course, it is. The colors, that roughly hewn kind of children's toy. And after researching it, I kind of really was able to understand Sokov's thought process behind it. There's this very famous satirical children's story in Russia with the same name, Noses, by Gogol. And it talks about this nose on this Russian bureaucrat's face popping off, developing a life of its own, and surpassing him in his career. And so you kind of see this big nose that is on its growth and all these different kinds as well. It was a satirical piece that, of course, was commenting on the ridiculousness of the social standards at the time, and how important career is to a person, and just both the piece and the story hold that. Although it looks like just a simple children's toy, holds a very deeper satirical and political message underneath.
Absolutely. Pull that string there and show them. There you go. There's our mechanical piece. Yeah, so really an important piece. And the Freedman is really lucky to have so many of these Sokov works that you see here. I'm going to just pull back and kind of give you a good view of all of these pieces. I think we have over 300 works by Sokov in the collection, 200 or 300. Probably the only other museum in the country that has more works by Russian immigrant artists would be the Zimmerli, because that's their mission. And we've actually loaned work to the Zimmerli before, loaned Sokov works.
When researching him, when I first was looking through the pieces for the show, I did find out that he had recently passed away about a year before I had started the show. I think 2017, 2018 he had passed.
Very
although
nice.
it would be lovely to talk to him, I don't speak Russian. Just a few years too late.
Absolutely. All right, let's come back to this piece. This is a beautiful piece.
Yeah, it's definitely one of my favorite pieces. So this artist, he was classically trained in, classical painting as well. And then he started while in his schooling, he started in a glass studio, and where he learned how to do stained glass works. And he fell in love with that and really wanted to strengthen his career in stained glass art. He moved to the U.S. with his wife. He lived locally. He had unfortunately passed, and there wasn't too much written about him. Last year, me and David had the pleasure of interviewing his son, who kind of gave us more backstory and behind his work, as well as what he was like and his process. And that was really a really awesome thing that we got to do. He was commissioned by a lot of churches in Pennsylvania because of his stained glass work. And so you could drive around to different Pennsylvania churches and still see his work. I think it's very beautiful. I love the colors that he chose, and I feel like if you shine a light through it, it would just cast like the most beautiful kind of reflection.
It really does. This work for a long time had been on loan to Adley Binger, one of our music professors, the choral director. So pretty much until Adley retired, this work had been when I arrived in his office and was there for about 8 years, and it was in his window, and it was just beautiful when the light shined through.
I do remember a few years ago seeing a show at the Freedman at 40, I believe, which
Yes.
was student curated, and
Yep.
this piece was included. And I was able to remember it. I definitely loved it and wanted it to be into this show as well. I love that he is fairly local and that he has strong ties to the community and his local churches. And so very thankful that we get to show his work.
Absolutely, yeah. It was really nice to talk to Martins, is his son.
Mm-hmm.
There were, I don't remember how many children, but I know Martins has brothers and sisters. I think at least 4, there may be more.
Mm-hmm.
And Martins is also an alum from here,
Right.
went to Albright. So we're still in contact with him. And he did give us some great information about his father. In some of that research, we found also that he was commissioned to do over 200 churches across the U.S.
Wow, all right.
So I did find that recently, that there's a lot more than what we had thought. In the catalog, it talks about 4 of the kind of regional ones, one in Allentown, one in Mooresville, one in Lebanon. And they are arranged, and there are others regionally as well, but they range, they're all denominations. You see Presbyterian and Lutheran, things like that. But originally, Mr. Lenotz came from Latvia and studied.
He came as a refugee, actually.
Yes, studied fine arts there. Actually, then also studied stained glass there. And when he came here and settled in the area, he worked for Reading company that manufactured stained glass, and that's how he was able to get so many commissions. But he did eventually set up his own shop in Moton.
I think I remember reading that, yes, so he was able to have his own kind of stained glass shop as well.
Yeah. So this is one of those pieces that we're not sure exactly about the provenance. What we did find out in doing some research, and what we believe, is that this piece was given to the college and or President Masters after a dinner party that happened at the Lenotz house. So Mrs. Masters, who knew the Lenotz through church, was made aware that a visitor was coming to the college from some branch of the military, and that we're not sure about. But that they were actually looking for a stained glass artist to work on a commission in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
We're not sure which church exactly,
Oh, yeah.
but she invited him to meet Mr. Lenotz. The dinner party took place at the Lenotz home. Jane Masters-Nace, who's one of our lovely donors here at the college, remembers this happening, and that she believes then that this piece later, a few years later, was given to her father, who was president of Albright, as a thank you for that project that Mr. Lenotz got in the DC area.
And what a gift, they're really, it's not hard to believe how sought after he was. One, because of his craftsmanship, and also you don't see stained glass worked as, modern, like as a modern medium. It's very skilled, it's a very old practice, and so, it's really great that we have a piece like that. It is so unique.
It is. It's really unique. And this is also an unusual piece because it's one of his more secular pieces that's really kind of looking at different elements that are outside of what he normally did for those religious commissions. But he's using, however, some of the same media, so the concrete that you see there to bind it all together, the steel form, and then the glass itself. So a beautiful, beautiful piece that we're happy to have.
It reminds me a lot of like a cityscape, like the...
It does, yeah.
With the skyscrapers.
I've never thought of it that way, but it really does. All right, let's go over to Mr. Bowles, and then we're going to end with our Salvador Dalí piece. So I'm going to, if you don't mind, this was also a last minute addition. So Bree did not get to do a lot of research about this, but I have a lot to share with you. So what I was able to find about this artist is that he is considered a Soho artist. So he was in New York,
Right.
and he was very well known there. He was actually, in all the print that I could find, was referenced as a gypsy. I could find no date of birth for him, nor could I find any kind of attribution as to his ethnicity or anything like that. But everything listed him as a gypsy. I'm not sure if that's because he actually was from that kind of heritage, or if it's just because he was such a bohemian spirit, and people talk about that as well. But the reason that he became very well known is there's this little triangle of land that's basically a traffic island that was completely concrete. I can't remember all the streets, Broome and I'm not going to remember them all, Thompson, Broome, and something.
In New York City.
Yeah, it's where 3 streets meet, forming this kind of triangular island. And it was very bare, and he started putting sculptures there.
Wow.
He just made these sculptures and started putting them, and eventually there were 19 that he had erected. Of course, he did not do this with the permission of the city.
No.
So this was in the late 60s, early 70s, but people loved it. They would come out, they would hang out there. However, it was a bit of an eyesore because many of his sculptures collected trash and debris, things like that. At some point, the city decided to, because they wanted more green spaces, they decided to remove all the sculptures. So many of the sculptures went, back to the artist. He sold some of those. The most famous one was Tree of Life, which is an outdoor sculpture that we have here.
I love that.
Yes, and Patricia Hummel was responsible for us getting that particular work. However, in the 1970s, 1974, the college invited this artist to do a residency here.
Really?
Yep. And so he came. He actually constructed Sounding Board, which is another outdoor sculpture we have.
Yes, I believe I've seen that.
Yep. That's the one as you come in to the parking lot.
Yes. Okay.
Yep, that's there now. And also another untitled work that is loosely referred to as Tall Pole, and that's in the atrium of Rosner now. You may remember that from being in the back, really tall with chain links on it. This was the third piece that he constructed while he was here. This is called Locomotive, and for more than 30 years, we could not find this piece.
Right, we had talked before about that, which I thought was so interesting.
Yeah.
And yeah, it definitely fits here in this show. I love it. I do think it reminds me the Locomotive. Before you would have told me the title, I see very, like Indian headdress.
That's what I see.
Yeah, or even like these like elongated, almost like razors, like coming up, which I think is interesting.
So he would often title his pieces either based on what he thought they looked like or from their component parts. So I think that this is a case where the things that you see here were most likely parts of, a train in some reason. And so that's probably why this got named the way that it did. But this piece had been made and then disappeared, and we couldn't find it. And as I said, we've done a couple of inventories since I've been here. The last big inventory that we did in 2019, we actually found the piece. It was in the basement of the theater, behind the HVAC boiler, wedged between it and the wall.
How did it get there?
It had no base, and originally it had no base. It was actually setting on a concrete block, so the block was missing. And I asked our current sculpture professor, Brian Glaze, to mount the piece for us, clean it up, which he did. He sandblasted it, it had some rust, things like that. He oiled it, and now it's been restored to the beauty that you see here.
You did a great job, so thank you, Professor Glaze, for that. That's great.
Really, really
I'm so
good.
happy we found it.
I am so happy we found it too. To close out that story, the one thing that I will say is, so there was a movement in New York later in Soho to have those sculptures put back. And a lot of arts activists were very angry that they were removed and indicated that, city officials had promised that those would come back. However, the artist had sold many of the pieces. So the Tree of Life sculpture that I referenced earlier, which was Mr. Bull's latest piece, the piece that he did, the last piece he did when he was alive, that is the piece that they were most concerned about because it was the anchor piece for that park, which is now known as Sunflower Park. However, he had sold it to a New York City photographer named Aaron Rose. And Aaron Rose, through Dr. Hummel, actually donated it and had already donated it to the college. But there's still some art activists who would love to see his work put back. I think they were able to get 3 sculptures back, but yeah.
I see that a lot with site-specific art that's been kind of taken down.
Yeah.
If when it's reached in the public eye, there's people out there who are enjoying it and loving it, and to take it away, it's so hard to put it back. There's some artists who make site-specific work, and if it cannot be in that site, it will be destroyed, kind of thing. But yeah, I love that there's still people out there who are interested in this artist. I'm so happy that we were able to fix this piece as well and have it shown today.
Me too. All right, so I'm going to stay on this side, and just because there's kind of this big open space and people will be able to maybe see this work better from this angle.
So yes,
Might have to come around actually.
such a statement piece by Salvador Dalí, Hallucinations of the Toreader with spoons. It's definitely alluding to his very famous painting that shares the same name except with the with spoons part. There's in that painting as well as this sculpture, there's this matador. It's really calling attention to Dalí's hometown and his upbringing, where bullfighting is like a major sport and part of their culture, as well as the music and different motifs that he has constantly used in his work, including the spoons. With Dalí, his whole career definitely embodies that kind of dreamy memento, like pulling things from your dream. That was a big part of his artistic process as well. I read that he would kind of enter a state of hyperbolic sleep, which is like right when you fall asleep, and he would hold a spoon in his hand. So as soon as he entered that REM kind of cycle, he would let go of the spoon, it would drop, and it would hit a plate on the bottom and waking him up, and he would be able to use the images that his subconscious kind of conjured and put them into his art. So he was a super interesting man, very famous, probably the most well-known artist in the whole show of Household Name almost.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm super excited that we got to use this sculpture. You don't see a lot of his sculpture pieces, you see a lot of his paintings.
Mm-hmm.
So I did think that was really interesting. I thought it was really important to be able to show that. You see this kind of drum, and then into this matador with the spoons all around. The more you look, the more you kind of even pull out more just images. I really do love it.
Yeah, it's a really important piece. Believe it or not, this is actually a multiple. So there are 5 other versions of this. And Mr. Rosenberg, who is also another Albright alum who was here for a couple of years, donated this work. And he's donated many things, he and his wife Carol, to the college over the years. He's a fine art appraiser, an art dealer, has done many, many prints with artists. But he's credited with working with Dalí to do this particular piece. As I said, there are 5 other versions, so 6 altogether. And what's interesting is some recent research I did on the piece turned up a legal battle. That's between 2 lawyers who purchased one of these multiples and co-own it, and then dissolved their partnership. And one of the attorneys took the piece, and the other is suing, since it was co-owned, for partial ownership of it. So I'm not sure what the end result of that has been. That was, I think, last year. I'd love to find out what happened with that. But yeah, definitely. And many folks on campus will remember this was in the former president's home, Dr. and Mrs. McMillan. This was in the dining room of their home. We actually tried to recall it. You might know this. We tried to recall it for a show, and we're not able to get it back from the McMillans. It is quite heavy, I will say.
I'm sure if you had a piece such as such a statement piece such as this, very beautiful, I would be having a hard time giving that to.
Yeah, I'm sure there were reasons for it, but we did miss it in the 40th anniversary show, so I'm really happy to have it here, for sure, back in the gallery. That was awesome, Bree. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure doing this. Major thanks to you and the CFA and Albright College for allowing me. And thank you for everybody on live stream tuning in. It really warms my heart. I'm so excited.
Bless your heart.
It's been awesome. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, it was really, really my pleasure. And again, as you said, thank you to all the folks that came. I also want to say that we do have a forthcoming catalog. So anybody who's interested, if they drop us a private message with their address, then we will be sure to send a catalog to them. Okay? All right, you're getting some love here. Great job, Brianna. That was from Tom Dean.
Oh, thank you, everybody.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And again, thank you, Bree.